Today is all about getting you immersed with SQL and Python. You're going to learn how to set up and create your own database and connection, as well as writing queries in SQL using Python. We're going to query to add information, delete information, and we're going to do all this through interactive code that I take you guys through. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back, guys, for another episode of Code with Josh. For obvious reasons, I'm Josh, and I'm stoked to have you guys here. Before I dive into today's video, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe. That really does help my channel out in the crazy YouTube algorithm. So if you get value today, hit the like button. Today is all about learning SQL and how we can integrate it with Python. We're going to do all this with SQLite as you learn how to set up and create your own database with its own connection. And I'm going to share with you guys how you can make queries to and from your database, not only using Python, but using SQL syntax. What does all this mean? I'm going to break it down for you guys. Real quick, guys, the first link in the description, that's my weekly Python newsletter. And right now, I actually have an ongoing series dedicated to SQL and Python. You can think of this as like an extension to that series. So head on down, first link in the description, and come join in on the fun with my weekly Python newsletter. All the other links are down there. They're dedicated to you guys and helping you out wherever you're at in your Python journey. Okay, now on to the reason why you're all here, SQL and Python. Let's get to it.
All right, here we are, guys. The goal of this episode is to really get you introduced to SQL and Python and how you can get started using it right now. All right, so I'm going to break this all down. I've written out these steps of the order I'm going to go in, and I'm going to show you a few routes, few different paths you could take here. Okay, so each of these steps we're going to go through, I'm going to build out a function to actually take care of this for us. And as always, I'm going to explain each step of the process and my thought process along the way. Okay, so if you haven't already done so, open up your terminal. Okay, I'm not going to do this. I'll type it out, but you need to get SQLite. Now, I'm using SQLite because SQLite is a great starter for pretty much there we go, SQLite. For pretty much anything we want to get going. So prototypes, introduction to SQL, and it works really well with Python because it spins right up. It's built on Python. It uses Python. And once you get that habit down of how you can write SQL queries, this really transitions over into other versions of SQL. When we can use other versions of SQL as well, like MySQL, Postgres, all of those also work. So run that command and you're going to get SQLite. And up top here, we are just going to say import SQLite. Okay. I am going to import something else here. Okay, this is kind of just for me. This is like a fancy way to do print from ice cream import IC, and I'm just going to rename IC as print. I did cover an episode on this recently on the channel. I will link that in the description, or I'll try and link it right here if you guys want to use this. It's just for readability in the terminal. Okay, great. Now, typically, before I even write these functions, I'm going to show you what SQLite really looks like, okay, and how we get this started. Now, to build out our database, we need to create what we call a connection. Okay, so I will create this object called connection, and I will say SQLite connect. Inside here, we put the name of your database. This could be absolutely anything you want. Okay, so I'm going to call it subscribe.db. It needs to end in that DB extension for database, but really it can be called anything else. Now you can see I even spelled subscribe wrong. Once we have that, we need a way to interact with the database. Now typically, call this anything, but typically you're going to see it called cursor. And cursor allows you to interact with the database. This is really what's doing it. I could take my connection and they have a built-in cursor method that we could take there. Okay, so pretty much that's me establishing a database. Okay, I don't have a table yet in my database, which we could create now. With that cursor, okay, I'm going to code this out differently, but I want to show you what it looks like here. With our cursor, I could take the cursor and we would execute commands in SQL. Okay, simply put, like that's just pretty much straightforward how we do it. Anytime we're done, we always want to close our connection. Okay. Now inside execute is where we would write any type of SQL queries we have. Right now, I'm going to turn this off. I'll run my code to show you that automatically it initializes and it creates a database for you, which is really cool. We've built out that connection. You created a way to interact with it. And over here, you're going to see that database created. Now, we can't see anything. That's fine. Okay. All right. I wanted you to see that because the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to do this through functions to actually hold everything as a wrapper. So my cursor is actually going to be replaced with a context manager. So if you're wondering why, Josh, I've seen this done before. Where's the cursor, right? How are you interacting with the database? Well, I'm going to show you how here. Okay, so I'm going to delete this and I'll bring all this up and we're going to start over here. Let me delete our database and just build it out through our functions. So step one, I need to initialize that database. So let's create a function called like get connection. This can take some type of database name, all right? And we want to try to create that connection, just what I did there before. So I'm going to try to return a SQLite connect, right? I'm setting up the database the same way. What goes inside connect? Well, the name of our database. So whatever I give it. If I have a try, I need an accept. So I'm just going to say accept. And we're going to print off here. Let's print off the error we actually get. So, actually redo this. Exception as E. Okay. And then let's actually get the error. So I'm just going to say error. And we're going to put in here our exception, right? And if we get the error, let's also just raise it, right? So I've created this connection, right? When I run this function, giving it a name, it's going to create that database just like we did before, right? Now, I wanted to house everything in a main function, right? That's just good practice. Okay, I'm going to house everything in a main function. And really, when I call this function, I am going to create my connection. This time, I'm going to call my function getConnection. And inside here is where we will put our database name, subscribe.db. That's really it. Okay. I'm going to run this to get the database going here, but let's say if name is equal to our main. Let's just call our main function. Right, so this is going to build us out the database the same way we did before. Boom, done. Okay, I've created it. I'm ready to go. All right, so initially all I did was I built out that connection. I am establishing a database. Now, if you run this and you don't already have a database, it's going to create one automatically for you. If you close your program out and you run it again, you already have a database created, so it's going to connect to the existing database for you automatically, which is pretty cool. All right, great. That takes us in here to step two. Okay, so I'm gonna close this connection function. We built out the connection for it. And once we have this database, you can think of a database as a spreadsheet. And within a spreadsheet, we can have multiple tables. So the database is just like the housing unit. It doesn't have anything in it yet. We need to create ourselves a table, and your database can have multiple tables. Like for example, if you're an e-commerce store, you might have a table for all your orders and you might have a table for all your customers. They're still in the same database and eventually they can speak to each other. But right now it's just individual, one table. So I'm going to create a function. Let's just call it a create table. Now I need to give this my cursor. Remember, cursor is the way that we can interact with the database. But I don't have a cursor because I created a connection through a function. This is my connection. Okay, so I'm going to tell it, hey, I'm going to give this some type of connection. Okay, and with that, we are going to create a table with it. Okay, So this doesn't need to be written out in a variable, but I'm going to do it so it's easier to read. I'm going to make my first query. Now, when working with SQLite, notice that I have 6 quotation marks. Okay, we need those. Our query is going to go in between there, right? So I'm pretty much going to say here some SQL syntax. Learn the SQL syntax, very straightforward and basic, and you can use that in other versions of SQL. I want to create a table if it doesn't already exist. So exists. Create table if it doesn't exist. Cool. What is the name of the table in the database? Let's call this users. Okay, so I'm naming the database. Then we're going to put a set of parentheses. Now I need to create and name each column that's going to be in this table. So for example, I might have an ID, I might have a name, I might have an age, and let's say like email. Okay, these are each columns in my table. Now, we can name the ID, we can name these columns, but we also need to specify what type of data are we giving it. Okay. Now, guys, I covered this in my SQL and Python series, which I'm writing over in my newsletter, the Nerd Nook. That's the first link in the description. I'm doing a whole SQL and Python series. This is an extension of that. So if you guys want to check it out, that's the first link in the description. All right. But really, our ID is going to be unique to each entry in the table. So I will know in the future what to delete. If I want to delete something, I can target it by the ID. Now, the ID is an integer, but it's also our primary key, okay? So it's what represents each unique item in our table. Name is going to be text. It's not called a string anymore. This can't be empty, so I'll say not nil. Age is an integer, okay, if you want it to be empty, or we can put not nil. And then email is, I'm going to say text. And we could even say something here that no 2 users could have the same email. So I could be like unique. This is unique to a user, okay? This is the query. This is the SQL syntax we're going to run to create that. So once we've created our SQL query, I'm going to try to execute this query. So I'm going to say with my connection, I want to do something. I want to take my connection and I want to execute. Cool. What are we going to execute? What do we want to run? I want to run my query. That's really it. I'm going to print here and I'm just going to say table was created as a success. And let's just say accept exception as E. So if we get that error, we're just going to come down here. Let's just print E. Okay, this is really good. So I am creating a table. Going down to our main function, I'm just going to come here and I'm going to put here create my table. Let's call our function create table and we need to give it our current connection. Okay, now you can run this. We're not really going to see much changes happen. I've already created my database. We won't see those changes until we start actually adding data to it. I'll run it just to make sure no errors were thrown when I was trying to create my table. Okay, so it's done running. Table was created. It was a success. And you can see here, IC, that's ice cream. That's why it's green. It's being specific for me. If I have variables, this is a great tool. I really like it. It's kind of like logging, the logging module, but a little bit easier. Okay, this was the last episode, and that's what I imported up here up top. If I go into it, we don't see anything, right? That's fine. That's normal. I'm not going to. Okie dokie. Cool. So I'm going to close this down. Our table was created. Awesome. Let's add some users to the database so we can see it actually working.
If you've made it this far and you're getting value, do me a favor, hit that like button. And if you're not already, subscribe to the channel. That really does help me out.
So what can we do here? Well, let's make our function. Let's call this insert user. Okay. This user, right, it's an action with our database. So this needs a way to speak to our database. So I am going to give it a connection. Then we're going to give it other items. So do you remember what items do I need to give each user in my database? We can go up and look. We have these 4. Okay. Now you don't need to give ID. ID is automatically created because it's the primary key. The outside information we need to give is anything that's not the primary key. So I'm going to have to give a name, an age, and an email. So going down here, I'm going to give this a name. Let's use good practice here. I'll do type hintings. Age is going to be an integer, and email will also be a string. Okay, so this is the information we are giving to the database right here. Cool. So what do we want to start off with? Well, I'm going to make a query, right? I'm going to make a request to my database. And what is our request going to be? Well, our SQL command to add data in the database is insert into. Okay, this is like append or add if we're thinking about Python. So what do I want to insert into? Not our database, because I could have many tables. We want to choose the specific table. So I want to insert into my table that's called users. Okay? What am I going to give it? Well, I'm going to give it a name, I'm going to give it an age, and I'm going to give it an email. Okay, now these are just the names of the columns. So how do I assign those values? Well, I'm going to say values, a set of parentheses, and then what should go here? What are you thinking? Well, I'm actually going to put placeholders. Question mark, question mark, question mark. These are going to be the values to our columns. Now, this is parameterized. So by doing this, this is actually a really good practice because this is going to help us prevent any type of SQL injections. I'm giving parameterized values. So these will become values, but they're not really the hard-coded values yet. It's like the first question mark is the value for name. Age is whatever I give the second question mark. So all I know is I'll give it 3 values. Okay, so let's try to do something. What do I want to try? Let's establish my connection. Let's take our connection and let's execute. Cool. What do I want to execute? I want to execute my query. Okay, then I need to give it the data for my values. So name, age, email. Right, now I'm using those parameters that we gave our function. When this is done, let's just say, let me actually put an F string. Let's say user, cool. Then let's just take their name and say was added to your database. Cool. Accept exception as E. Let's print off our exception. Okay, our query, this is our SQL using parameterized values, and then we are executing that. Okay, taking my connection, I'm executing. What do I want to execute? My query, my request. What does my request hold? These are the values because I specified that there's going to be values here. Pretty cool. Let's go down to the main function and let's actually try this out. So let's do a few things here. So I guess before this, I should actually say try here. So I'm going to try because remember that we always want to close the connection. So really, I'm going to actually put finally here. Anytime we're done with it, I'm going to close my connection. So I created my database. So let's give like a few actions. I'm going to say like start, let's say like int input, let's say like enter option, add, delete, update, search, or add multiple, add many. That'll be faster to type down the road. Okay, so I could spin this up something like this. If start is equal to, let's make sure that it's all lowercase for us. If it's equal to add, okay, cool. So in order to add, I'm going to call my function. Well, before I even call my function, let's like get data about the user. So I'll be like name equals input, age equals int input, and email is equal to our input. Okay, let's just say enter email, enter age, and enter name. So I have the information I need to insert into my database, which is pretty cool. Let's call our function now insert user. We need to give it our connection. And then inside here, I am just going to give it all the values. So name, age, and email. That's pretty much it, okay? Let's execute our first real query. This is adding our data in. So let's run it. We should just see Josh has been added after we collect the information, of course. So let's say add. Oops, there we go. I've been thrown an error. Do you see why? It's because I said int input, which I don't know why I said that. Okay, trash that, run your code again. Cool. Add. There we go. Name. I'll say Josh, 27. If you guys want to email me any questions you have, I'm going to put that here, 0toknowing@gmail.com. Enter. There we go. Operational error. No column named email. Okay. Let's go up and check. So I'm gonna scroll this down. I want to keep that here actually. And let's see why I got that error. So we have name, age, email. It's the only thing that could be a problem. ID, name, age, comma. Don't forget your comma. Okay, it couldn't register that. I'll start from scratch again. I'll delete that. Okay, run your code. See, small little syntax errors. That's fine. My spelling, my punctuation, not the greatest there. Let's say add. Okay, Josh. Let's try this one final time here. 0toknowing@gmail. Enter. Boom. There we go. User name was added. So this is what we're printing off. This is the actual value. So user Josh. So I am now inside this database. That is pretty cool. Okay. So our table is working. Check. Insert user. Check. Let's now query the database. Let's make a request to the database to get all the information in it. Currently, right, I'm the only information that's in it, but that's fine because I'm about to add a lot more really soon. Let's create a function called fetch users because I want them all, whoever's in there. We need to give it our connection, okay, our database connection. And maybe too, I'm going to actually say here, let's say like condition. And I could give this a condition. It doesn't need one. So I'll say string is none. Okay. And this is going to be a condition like fetch all the users where the name is Josh. So I could only get Josh if I wanted to, or I could give another condition to make sure I'm only getting back the data that we want to get back. Okay, let's make a query. And let's just say select everything. That's my star from the table name. So I want to select everything from my users table. If we do have a condition, if that's true, let's add to our query. So query plus equal, we need to add to it. So where is a SQL word. Okay, so where what is true, whatever my condition was. Where name equals Josh, where age is greater than 25, whatever we want our condition to be. Okay, with SQL, we do need to follow that structured order. Okay, and I covered that in my articles, so head on down, check that out. First link in the description. Select from where needs to be in that order. So, okay, if the condition is true, I'm going to expand on that query. Otherwise, let's try to take our connection, not condition, our connection, and let's say rows equals. So I'm creating the rows because this is going to pretty much return a list to us. And let me specify that. This is going to return a list of tuples, okay? Because we added to the database, if I just put like here, it's going to go like Josh 27 email, okay? It's going to be, I'll just put E to keep it on the same line. I can say email now. So it's going to return like this list of tuples. So I'm creating rows, and let's take our connection. Let's execute. What do we want to execute? Our query, whatever that is. Now it's going to return everything. So SQLite has a built-in function called fetch all. I want to fetch everything. Okay. And when we're done, I'm going to return the rows. Cool. Accept exception as E, print off E. Pretty cool. Okay, so if you guys need to, pause the video, okay, read through. SQL is just like spoken English, which is pretty cool. All right, so select everything from our database where this condition is true. All right, if we don't have a condition, it's just going to give me everything. That's fine. All right, so let's return now. So I'm going to come down here. I did queries, so that's actually the second one. Let's just say elif start is equal to search. I'll call it that. So if it is search, let's just print off and let's just say all users. Cool. Now, what did I return? I returned a list. So for every user in whatever my function gives me back, I do need to give it my connection. Okay, let's just print off the user. Okay, so when I run this, I am already in the database. So really, I should just see my information returned. Let's run it. Let's give it a check. So let's just say here, search. There we go. There's my information that was stored in the database. You can see that I am the primary key. This is our ID. Once we start adding multiple people, everyone's going to have their own ID. All right, that's going to be unique. And then we're all having our own information. So pretty cool. Guys, any questions? You're struggling? Anything doesn't quite make sense? Feel free, as always, to drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts. And if you're getting value, hit that like button and subscribe. That really does help out the channel, helps me reach a larger audience. Okay, so fetch users is done. Okay, so insert, fetch. Let's do the remaining two. There's three, there's a bonus. Okay, I want to be able to add multiple people at once. But let's just focus on delete. So let's make a function, delete user. Quiz time. What do I need to give my function? Well, we need to give it our connection. What else do I need to give it? Who am I deleting? Right? Who am I deleting? Well, remember, what does every user have that's unique to them? Their ID. So I'm going to give them a user ID. This is an integer. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to make a query. So query. Let's write some SQL. This is new SQL. I'm going to say delete from table name, users. Okay, what do I want to delete? What must be true? Where the ID is equal to question mark. Remember, parameterized. So I'm not going to put the actual value here. I want to prevent SQL injections from happening. So I'm putting a question mark. This is my statement. Delete from my users table where the ID is equal to the value that I give it. Cool, that's it, my query. Let's try to take our connection. Okay, we are going to take our connection and we are going to say execute. What do I want to execute? My query. Now we can give the value to the question mark. The value to the question mark is our user ID. I'm just going to print off here. Let's do an F string. Let's just say user ID. Let's say user ID was deleted. Cool. Accept exception as E. Print E. Done. Let's go down here. Let me just throw in another elif for us. Let me space these out for you guys. Okay, I'm all about readability. Elif start is equal to delete. Okay, so if it's equal to delete, we need to find out who do we want to delete. So let's find out, I'll do this by ID number because that's just our primary ID. Let's just say user ID is equal to int input, enter user ID. Cool. We can say delete user, give it our connection, and we're going to give it our user ID, like so. Awesome. Run your code. Remember, I'm already in the database. I am number 1 in the database. So I'm going to do delete, enter, 1, enter. Programming error. Parameters are of unsupported type. Okay, this is good. Let's figure out why. Let me close this. So parameters are unsupported type. Let's go up here to our function. Query user ID question mark. If I'm going to drop a comma a second, try that. I think that might be why. Let me check it. There we go. Yeah. So just in case there was like another value, I'm not saying that this is the sole one. I'm just dropping a comma here. And that does specify user ID was deleted, user 1 was deleted. Okay. So if I were to run this, I should have put my code in a loop. If I say search, enter, there's no users anymore. I've been deleted. All right. Cool. Okay. Moving on to updating a user. Okay, so let's call this update user. What do we need to give it? What do I need to give it? Let's say we want to give the user a new email. Okay, so I'm going to say connection. It needs who are we updating? So it's going to take which ID. And then, for example, what are we updating? For this one, let's just say I'm going to update the email of the account. Okay, cool. So let's make our query. Now, new SQL word, update, users table. I want to set the email to become something. Okay, where? Well, where the ID is equal to what I give it. All right, so now I have 2 parameterized metrics here. Update the users table and set the email to become this, wherever the ID matches this. Okay, so we have that. Try with our connection. We are going to take our connection. We are going to execute. We are going to give it our query. And we are going to say new email. Or I don't really have new email. I guess I just have email. And then our user ID. Cool. I'm giving it in this order, right? Because in the SQL, it's just following the same structure. Brilliant. Let's just say user ID has new email of email. Cool. Done. Accept exception as E. Print E. Okay, that is awesome. Okay, I will test this one at the end, okay, because right now my database is empty, right? Let's just finish out strong here with the bonus. I want to have the ability to add multiple users at the same time, okay? Because adding one over and over, that's fine when you already have your existing database. But in the beginning, what happens if you need to upload data that you already have stored to a database to kind of get things started? So I'm going to call this, I already have what? Insert user. So let's call this insert users, right? Let me give spacing. I want you guys focused on the task at hand. Close this up. There we go. So what do I need to give it? Well, we need to give it, of course, our connection. And then I'm going to give it users. So let's say your users was stored in like a list. And your list is really a tuple with values, right? It's kind of like how we set up the database. So I have a name, which is a string. Age is an integer. Email is also a string. Okay. So that's what the users is going to be. It's going to be a list of tuples. Each tuple contains a name, an age, and an email, a string, an integer, and a string. Cool. Let's make a query. Okay, so what do we need here? What's my SQL query going to be? This can be like a little quiz for you guys. How do we add to a database? Well, kind of like we did before. Insert into users name, age, email. What are the values? Well, the values are whatever we give them, just like that. Let's try to create our connection. We're going to take our connection and we want to execute. Execute. Okay, what do we want to execute? Now, I'm not just executing one anymore. Execute, just like in English, is a singular word. So I want to run one thing. But this time I want to execute many. Okay, it's going to run this many times to add all the data into the database. I want to execute my query and I'm going to give it a list of users. This list could have one, it could have 1,000. Okay, let's just say now something like let's say the length of the list. So like how many users were added. Let's be like len of our list. So number 8 users were added to the database. Awesome. Except, you guessed the exception as E, print off E. All right. Guys, drop any questions you have. Happy to answer. I love the engagement. I love helping you guys out on your journey. All right. So we've just built out these two. Okay. I'm just going to add them here in my database. All right. So I have one for add. I have one for search. We have one for delete. Let's just kind of go in here. Let's type let's say elif start. Let's do update first. Let's say update. So if we're trying to update the user, we need to get the user ID. So I'm actually just going to copy this, paste this. We also need to get the email. What is the new email? I guess I should call that, new email. So I'll be like here, enter a new email. Cool. We're going to call it update user. Let's give it the required things. So it takes our connection. It takes the user ID, and it's going to take the new email, just like so. And since we're down here, let's finish off strong. Let's say we want to, what did I call it? Add many. So let's say elif start is equal to add many. Cool. To add multiple, now I'm going to hard code this, okay, for my example. But ideally, you'd be giving it like a list of a bunch of users. So let's just make a list of users. And inside here, I'll put like 3 different people. Okay, let's call like Chandler. Chandler is 29. His email is friends@none.com. Next one here, let's call Truman. Truman is 37. This reminds me of the Truman Show. Anyone ever watch that movie, The Truman Show? Truman at the show.com. And then let's add one more. Let's add something kind of funny. Let's be like Olga. Olga is 68 and her email is Siberian grandma@gmail.com. Okay. So this data would be coming from elsewhere. I hard coded this list of users, but this is going to give us the ability to just execute many. Okay. So we have that. Now all I need to do is I'm going to say insert users connection, and then I'm going to give it my list to take users. Pretty cool. It's kind of done, guys. Let me run my code so you guys can actually see it all take place. Remember, currently the database is empty. So I'm running it. It's a fresh database. I'm going to go through each of these, and we are just going to add some things. So I'm going to start by just doing add again. I will say Josh. I'll do everything I did before for you guys. Okay, so I was added. Okay, in fact, geez, I don't like that I have to keep doing that over and over. So start, I'm going to just say boo-doo-doo. Let's create x equals int input. And I'm just going to be like 1 activate to freeze. Okay, while x is not equal to 2. Okay, let me just bump everything inside here because I just want that to run. I don't want to have to run it every time for you guys. So making a while loop to just house everything and keep it running. Okay. So I'm already in the database. All right, so I'll just kind of pick it from there. I added myself to the database. Sorted. Done. I'll say active. Okay, so if I want to search, let's just check. There, I'm already in the database. Let's keep it going. So let's now add many. There we go. 3 users were added. This time, if I type search, it's because I should have said activate again, not search. That's my fault. It's nothing with the SQL database. It's just how I have the loop set up. This time when I actually type search, so one search, there's everyone in my database, right? That is pretty cool. Let's change Chandler's email. He has friends at none. Let's say has friends at Gmail. I don't know. Has friends at Gmail. So 1. What do I want to do? I want to update. Okay, user ID. Chandler has a user ID of 2. His new email is going to be hasfriends@gmail.com. There we go. It says I've updated it. We can check by going in there. We are going to search for everyone. And you can see that I've updated Chandler's email right there. That's super, super cool. Let's do one final test. Let's delete Truman from the database. Delete. Truman is 3, delete. If I run it and we check again, search, you can see that they're not there. Okay, pretty cool, guys. That's your starter pack for SQL and Python.
Well, there you have it, guys. Our first SQL in Python that's strictly dedicated to showing you how you can set up and create your own database, all using Python and integrating SQLite. I hope you guys got value today. Drop a comment. Let me know any questions you have. I love engaging with you guys down in the comments. Happy to answer any questions or talk about my thought process throughout the way. So drop some comments, hit that like button if you got value, and subscribe to the channel. This was all about SQL and Python. And remember, guys, if you want to join in on all the action, the first link in the description is my weekly Python newsletter where right now I'm writing about SQL and Python. Well, guys, until next week's episode of Code with Josh, I will see you then.